Now, this afternoon, in our first video of the day, we're going to be discussing some of the latest developments in the John Durham investigation. Now, first of all, we do know that Michael Sussman was recently identified as an indicted person in this case. In my opinion, probably one of the most important indictments we're going to see, as he leads to virtually everyone, and very specifically to the DNC, Hillary for America, and Hillary Clinton herself. So, in a recent court filing, John Durham detailed quite a bit of information about the exact nature of the evidence that he has against Michael Sussman. We're going to be taking a look at that. And then in the last 24 to 48 hours, we've learned that John Durham intends to call former FBI General Counsel James Baker to testify against Michael Sussman. Now, there is also the possibility that Baker could be testifying for a number of other reasons as well. If we take a look at some of the posts, we've been told in the past that Baker had testified against James Comey, that Baker had testified behind closed doors on a number of occasions, and of course, he actually did public testimony there in Congress. So we're going to take a look. We're going to see if we can't maybe tie some threads together and see where this is all going to go. I'm actually very, very excited about the direction this is all heading. In light of the fact that we are now seeing some movement in the Durham case, I want to take us back and just take a look at a couple of these posts. You know, one of the things that people use as a criticism of our favorite anonymous poster is that so many things were said. However, not necessarily many of them have come to pass in the way that a lot of people have interpreted. I want to focus on one thing, and that is the idea of indictments. Now, in post 3041, the post says the unsealing of the first several indictments will bring about unity and change that we can believe in, returning power to the people, returning the rule of law to our land. We stand together as patriots. Now, what was the very first indictment? Well, that was Kevin Clinesmith. And what was Kevin Clinesmith indicted for? He was indicted for lying and changing the content of an email so that he could get a FISA warrant on Carter Page. All right, so the content, the reason behind Kevin Clinesmith's indictment was for FISA abuse. So if we jump up here to post 3929 and 3921. In 3921, it says FISA indictments equal the start. And then again in 3929, FISA indictments equal start, public justice. So public justice results from the beginning of these indictments. Now, the first indictment itself was Kevin Clinesmith, but now we've had a new indictment, and that is in Michael Sussman. Now, Michael Sussman was a former DOJ employee who then went to work for Perkins Coie, and during his employment at Perkins Coie, he represented the DNC, he represented Hillary for America, and he was doing work directly on behalf of Hillary Clinton. Now, the indictment against Michael Sussman is regarding his participation in the Alpha Bank conspiracy, which is the now debunked plan to try to link President Trump and Russia together through this Russian bank, Alpha Bank. Now, we got the initial filing, the 27-page indictment against Michael Sussman. It gave us several interesting tidbits, and we've already gone through those here on the channel in the past. But we now have this new filing, which was filed by John Durham, because what happened was Michael Sussman and his lawyers had made a motion for a bill of particulars. So that would be essentially a request for more information about the indictment against him. Now, Durham, in his new filing, argues that the 27-page speaking indictment against Michael Sussman more than adequately informed him of exactly the charges he was facing. And I tend to agree. But during the course of this new filing, we get a lot of new information about exactly what type of evidence Michael Sussman is looking at when he gets to trial. Now, according to that latest filing, Durham has produced more than 6,000 documents, approximately 81,000 pages, and that is all against Michael Sussman. Now, these include information that were received in the course of the grand jury that Durham had brought against Michael Sussman. There includes 15 separate individuals which produced information, entities included in that, as well as organizations. Some of them are listed as political organizations, a university, university researchers, an investigative firm, and numerous companies. So let's decipher exactly what those things mean. Political organizations. I am certain, and Technofog agrees with me here, that refers directly to the DNC and, of course, Hillary Clinton's campaign for president, Hillary for America. Who is the university? Well, that would be Georgia Tech, because they are the ones that were tasked with finding this link between Alpha Bank and President Trump. Now, of course, those university researchers would be the people at Georgia Tech that were actually the team that was looking for that information. The investigative firm, certainly that is Fusion GPS, and the numerous companies would be the companies that are associated with Rodney Jaffe. He is the guy listed as tech tech executive one in the Michael Sussman indictment. Now, previously, we've talked about the fact that Durham is already in possession of emails from Jaffe, that research group, and then also Michael Sussman and Perkins Coie. And then, of course, we have the Perkins Coie billing records, which prove that Michael Sussman is actually working for Hillary for America and the DNC at the time that he was attempting to pass off that fake information to former FBI General Counsel James Baker. We also have records directly from Perkins Coie in the form of notes which relate to calls and meetings that were held regarding the Alpha Bank conspiracy. And then, of course, there's going to be all of that testimony that was gathered during the course of that grand jury investigation. Now, that's just the Alpha Bank issue, because John Durham's investigation goes much farther and wider, and even more specifically to FISA and other matters that we haven't had brought up in the public yet. Now, the filing also indicates that John Durham is working rather quickly to declassify a whole bunch of other documents and materials so that he can provide them to Michael Sussman. He says he's looking at 30 declassified reports of interviews conducted in the course of this aspect of the special counsel's investigation. Also, transcripts of grand jury testimony from multiple witnesses in that investigation. The majority of the FBI's electronic case file pertaining to its investigation of Alpha Bank and the conspiracy there. And then also emails, memoranda, reports, and other records obtained from Agency 2. Now, what is Agency 2? If the FBI is already listed as a named party in this investigation, Agency 2 could perhaps be the CIA, maybe it could be the NSA. Who else would have been listening? Certainly the CIA was involved in all of this, but I can see it perhaps being the NSA because we know that's the White Hats, the Wizards and Warlocks. Now, Durham also indicates that there is certain to be more information that will be produced from additional records, saying that the government expects to produce additional materials in subsequent productions, which will include additional interview memoranda, emails, and other records. You can bet they have it all. They are looking through every single piece of it. So why is this important? Well, Michael Sussman is simply the first indictment in relation to this grand and overarching Alpha Bank conspiracy. Certainly, John Durham, throughout the course of his investigation and the things that he has found, is looking to indict the other people that were involved in the Alpha Bank conspiracy as well. In the exact same way that I anticipate there will be further indictments in the FISA investigation and, of course, the Russia hoax investigation as a whole. Now, this is all based on the volume of information that Durham possesses and the information he is certain to glean in the future, because the investigation is still ongoing. We have no idea how large John Durham's team is, but you can bet as a special prosecutor, he's got access to virtually unlimited funding. He probably has hundreds of investigators working underneath him, and they are all using every resource at the disposal of the federal government and his office in the special prosecutor to get all of it together and bring the best possible, strongest case that you can consider making. The very fact that John Durham called a grand jury on this issue and presented all of this evidence to them makes it even more likely that there will be a number of additional indictments outside of Michael Sussman. Just simply looking at the story, exactly how it all progressed, it's quite clear that a number of other people in there, Roland Jaffe, perhaps even the Georgia Tech investigators, they were all well aware of the fake information they were handing over to the FBI. And James Baker already said that Sussman lied to him when he asked him if he was representing anyone in particular when handing over that info. Now, we've talked before about how these investigators potentially put this information together and how they knew that they were producing illegal information, illegal because it was totally fake. They discussed the exact method of how to make it appear as if Alpha Bank and Trump servers were talking to each other. That exact method that they discussed is revealed in an email between people on the investigation team and Michael Sussman and others. It says, fill out a sales form on the two websites, faking the other company's email address in each form, and thereby it causes them to appear to communicate through each other's DNS records. And of course, one of the researchers also asked in these released emails, how do we plan to defend against the criticism that this is not spoofed or traffic and actually traffic that we are observing? There is no answer to that. This indicates that they were fully aware that what they were doing was illegal, knowing that they were manipulating data to try to make the appearance of communication between Alpha Bank and President Trump's servers. Now, all of this information was presented to former FBI General Counsel James Baker in the form of a white paper that was written by Michael Sussman, summarizing the exact nature of what they claimed was happening between Trump and Alpha Bank. And then that was presented to him on September 19th, 2016. And it was also Sussman who provided what he called new details concerning Trump and Alpha Bank to the CIA in February of 2017. So now, learning this, it makes it a little bit more likely that Agency 2 would in fact be the CIA. Now, considering Michael Sussman's detailed role in this conspiracy, this opens the door for potential obstruction of justice charges as well as conspiracy charges, and others in the group, such as Roland Joffe and those Georgia Tech researchers, might also be charged relating to the misuse of classified government data from DARPA. Because remember, it was only as a result of their access to those DARPA tools that they were able to put all of this stuff together. Now, Crowdstrike is another name that I am certain is going to come back up. Crowdstrike was deeply invested in the conspiracy to attempt to bring down President Trump. Remember, it was Crowdstrike who made the initial claim that it was Russia who hacked the DNC servers. And it was Crowdstrike who was retained by Perkins Coie back in May 2nd of 2016 on behalf of the DNC and de facto Hillary Clinton. We learned this in the form of a release, which is a statement of work between Perkins Coie and Crowdstrike, where they detail exact nature of what they intend to do and why they are hiring them. More interesting is that Michael Sussman and Sean Henry at Crowdstrike were old friends, possibly from his days at the Department of Justice, and of course, Sean Henry's long history of working with people like the DNC and Hillary Clinton. Now, with Michael Sussman's connections to Perkins Coie, Hillary Clinton, DNC, Hillary for America, Crowdstrike, the only question is, did the crimes of Crowdstrike, Sussman, Hillary, and the DNC, did those begin earlier than the initial transfer of information that Sussman made to the FBI and the clowns in America? And the answer is almost certainly, because it was only within one day of Perkins Coie bringing in Crowdstrike to take a look at the DNC server that they immediately made the claim that Russians had actually hacked the DNC servers. So there's a possibility here that Crowdstrike actually manipulated the data at that time to make it appear as if the DNC was hacked by the Russians and Cozy Bear. The interesting thought here is that Crowdstrike may not have been aware of any manipulation that happened. Perhaps they were just handed the information by Michael Sussman and the DNC. Crowdstrike was apparently the only one who was allowed to examine the DNC servers. But since the FBI never had the ability to examine them directly, how do we even know what Crowdstrike was looking at? Perhaps they were looking at an image that was given to them by Perkins Coie, the DNC, and Hillary for America. Truthfully, until we get a chance to take a look at them, we'll never really know what it was they were examining. Now, if Crowdstrike was set up to give this predetermined Russian narrative some legs, perhaps it was Michael Sussman and the DNC and Hillary for America that actually did it. Now, I mentioned James Baker in relation to Michael Sussman as the point man at the FBI who received this information. Well, the awesome news is now John Durham has announced that James Baker is actually going to be testifying in the case against Michael Sussman. Let's take a look. All right, so James Baker is now going to be testifying in the case against Michael Sussman. But remember, he already testified behind closed doors in Post 2323. Did James Baker just testify behind closed doors against Rod Rosenstein and James Comey, coordinating them to appoint Mueller? Have a wonderful day. And then again here in 2369, Baker testimony, House, what was learned. That was in his public session. And then also James Baker, panic in D.C., James Baker testifying against Comey. Now, this is all part of the plot to connect President Trump to Russia, which was an extension of the earlier operation, which began with the attempt to link him to Alpha Bank. So now John Durham is calling James Baker to testify in the case against Hillary Clinton's former campaign lawyer, Michael Sussman. At the time that he was testifying back in 2018, was that only part of his testimony to the House, or was that also part of his grand jury testimony, which allowed for John Durham to bring these indictments against Michael Sussman? Now, Sussman was indicted last month for lying to the FBI, and it was James Baker that he lied to. He gave James Baker the information, the faked information showing that Alpha Bank and Trump Tower were talking to each other. He lied to James Baker when James Baker asked him if he was working on behalf of any clients when he handed over this meeting. James Baker did not know at the time, apparently, that Michael Sussman was actually working for Hillary Clinton, although I would imagine it would be an educated guess. He resigned back in May of 2018 COVID-19, which, if I'm not mistaken, is what allowed him to come forward and give his testimony. But during a virtual hearing this past Tuesday, government prosecutors working on Durham's team announced their intention to call James Baker to testify as part of that Sussman case. Now, of course, Sussman has pled not guilty. He's only been charged with one count of making a false statement to a federal agent, which would be James Baker. If the case is only going to be about his fake testimony to James Baker and the FBI, then James Baker is going to nail Michael Sussman's butt to the wall. But I believe that by the time this actually comes to trial, there will be additional indictments brought against not only Michael Sussman, but the others that were involved in the Alpha Bank conspiracy. And the indication in the indictment against Michael Sussman is that Durham and his team intend to bring separate charges against Sussman, as well as additional defendants. Again, that would certainly be the others involved in the Alpha Bank conspiracy. So now, thinking back to the posts that I brought up at the beginning of the show, the first indictments will bring about unity. There is no timeline that is given inside that post. So, as I've said on a number of occasions, just because we were signaled something that has not happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. Unity against what? Well, that would be unity against the deep state. The deep state, the federal government, the seventh floor, the shadow government, they attempted to use the full power and might of the federal government to take down President Trump and, by proxy, you and I, we the people. These indictments that we've seen so far, Kevin Kleinsmith and now Michael Sussman, are merely the beginning. And the more indictments that John Durham brings, the greater the charges and the broader reaching the conspiracy is shown to be. This will lead to the awakening of many more people all across the United States. Certainly, when people are brought to justice, which is the intention of all of this, the deep state will crumble piece by piece by piece. And as I said just a moment ago, just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. I know that there are many people who are completely disheartened that something hasn't happened yet, something that they want to happen. But I want to remind everyone, not only do the wheels of justice turn slowly, but this is not on your timeline. This is not on anyone's timeline but God. And God will bring justice to the guilty in all due time. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you today.